It's early Saturday afternoon. When I went in to do some grading on Canvas, I noticed that the important YouTube lecture that I did on William Hobart hair had somehow not embedded. So I've come back in to re-record that lecture. I think perhaps it was too long, so I'm going to divide it up into two segments. I'll also change the due date for your papers and bump it up a day so that you can take account of my remarks, because I thought this was kind of an important lecture, and I'm sorry that it didn't get to you earlier. The biographical sketch of Hare in Heine and Shattuck is rather complete and longer than most. The picture that emerges is clearly one of a man born to considerable privilege, whose pedigree in the Episcopal Church of the 19th century was second to none. As Heine and Shattuck note, he first encountered Native Americans when he was 25 years old. He had left his parish, St. Paul's Church, Chestnut Hills, near Philadelphia, and had moved to Minnesota on account of his wife's failing health. There he saw signs that offered a $250 award to those who would kill a Sioux Indian and deliver his head. He wrote about that experience on Lake Superior in Minnesota. I saw numbers of them, that is, Native Americans, every day. Sometimes they were picking berries in the woods, sometimes lounging about the streets. At other times they were paddling their canoes along the shore of the lake. But no one seemed to take any interest in them, and their lives were precarious. They wandered about like sheep without a shepherd. There begins to emerge a picture of a complex man. A man who would take up a difficult mission, a mission that was fraught with ambiguities. On the one hand, he was a man of considerable empathy for the plight of the Native Americans, and he willingly traded the comforts of Philadelphia aristocracy for the saddle and buckboard in the expanding West. But on the other hand, Hare's attitude and motivations reflected just the sort of paternalism that I talked about last week. It is the same sort of paternalism that whites had adopted toward African Americans. When he was appointed in 1871 as Secretary for the Foreign Committee of the Board of Missions of the Episcopal Church, he wrote that, quote, "While deeply immersed body, mind, and heart in the work of making known the gospel among the heathen in distant lands, the Church has been derelict in making known the gospel to heathens not far off, but lying cold on the Church's bosom." He hewed to that higher law that saw a need for Native American savages to be civilized. Hare was sort of a St. Francis, a John Wesley, and an Andrew Jackson rolled into one. To be sure, he is of the same cloth as his grandfather, Bishop John Henry Hobart, who had confirmed members of the Oneida tribe in New York State 50 years before Hare's consecration. Within weeks after his consecration as Bishop of Niobrara, with jurisdiction over the Great Sioux Nation, Hare visited the Oneida Reservation in Wisconsin, to which they had been removed. He visited that reservation on his way to the Dakota Territory, and there he conducted his first confirmation as bishop on Easter Sunday in 1873. Listen to how he describes the occasion. "Many whom my grandfather confirmed in New York State 50 years before brought their grandchildren to be confirmed by his grandson. My first impressions of the condition of the Indians here were not gained under very favorable circumstances. The day was one of the dreariest of cloudy, chilly spring days. I had been on the railroad most of the night, and when I arrived at the reservation at 10 o'clock in the morning, I was still breakfastless. They have been on their present reservation some more than 50 and many less than 25 years. When they came to it, it was a dense forest. They have cleared nearly 20,000 acres of it with their own hands, and now thousands of acres are the very best farming land in the area. They have put up hundreds upon hundreds of miles of rail fence. They have cast aside their wigwams and have erected houses of logs and often sawn boards, which are quite equal to those of white settlers on the frontier. Opposite the church is the schoolhouse, where the missionary and his excellent wife hold day schools for a number of children on the yearly roll, 125. The number of average attendance is 49. Passing along the road beyond the church and the schoolhouse, we come to the cemetery, where there are many marble tombstones. Beyond this, we come to what was, a few years ago, the scene of an execution. The Indians have a keen sense of law and have their own tribunals. In this case, they arrested the man on whom suspicion had fallen, appointed two of their number as attorneys, one for the people and the other for the defendant. The native interpreter was chosen as judge, and the chiefs served as a jury. They patiently heard the evidence, and though the defendant belonged to an influential family and every effort was made to shield him from condemnation, they adjudged him to be guilty, sentenced him to be hanged, and with solemn propriety carried on the sentence of execution. I beheld also the Oneida brass band of 8 pieces, the musicians and their leader all full-blooded Indians. I heard them play by note, quick step after quick step, with an accuracy of time and a harmony of sound quite equal to that of country bands in the East. On our right is the church. It is a frame building painted white and will hold, some say, 250 people. It was preceded by a log church erected by the Indians themselves. The present church cost them $7,500 and was paid for by the Indians out of money received from the sale of some of their land. There is a project on foot to build a larger, more substantial edifice. The Indians have already prepared some of the requisite timber and have quarried and hauled large quantities of stone. Labor as they may, however, this new church must require a large outlay of what is with them very scarce, that is, money, probably not less than $5,000 more. They spoke of their need in this line in the council held today, and I told them that I was quite sure that their Christian friends in the East would help them, provided that I could tell them that the Indians were trying to help themselves. What then, according to Hare's description, denotes the success of the mission among the Oneida over some half-century? Well, the Oneida are settled farmers. They have fences. Remember what Carl Sandburg said, fences make good neighbors. They live in wood houses, like white settlers. They bury their dead in cemeteries with marble headstones. They have schools for the children. They have courts of law that function decently and in order. They have brass bands that can read music and play sprightly martial tunes. They have a good frame church house, and they have plans for an expansive stone church. By the way, that stone church would take more than 14 years to build, with every Oneida man contributing 1 day's wages each week toward its construction. That shows that they were really serious about it to the Eastern folk. The children were said to have picked berries that were sold in neighboring towns, and the women made and sold handcrafts to contribute to the building fund. Such was the cost and sacrifice for civilizing the savage in the world that Hare occupied.